This is No Hate Radio.
I'm no stranger to the rain. Oh, no. I'm no stranger to the rain.
Welcome to Season 2 of No Hate Radio. Thanks to those of you who are returning that have followed us in Season 1. We're starting a brand new season today, January 2025. I want to welcome any new listeners that are just now tuning in to No Hate Radio. We try and have a context or a mantra, a system where we evaluate any subject that we have in the context of why is it this way and what are we going to do about it, if anything. I'm Don Windle. I'm the facilitator and the host of No Hate Radio. Cameron Helwig, who's sitting right here with me, he's the producer and the director and actually does everything except talk on the radio.
Hi.
We're going to have a couple of guests for you today. We're going to have Reverend Andy Oliver, who's pastor at Allendale United Methodist Church, and Dylan Dames, who does a lot of things. I'm going to talk about him in just a minute. The topic, direction for Season 2 of No Hate Radio, is that last year, I want to back up a little bit and say last year, 2024, we spent most of the year consumed with the political landscape, the election, with what was going to happen. It generated what I call a lot of rocky traveling, a lot of things that left people fearful, left people distressed about the tone of the election, about a lot of things. We're going to start this year with this direction to where we want to hear about and we want to discuss efforts and activities by individuals and groups who are involved in some form of humanitarian activity, some form of attempting to make people's lives better, some form of understanding how to cope and live with and operate in what will probably be a new and certainly unknown political context in this country and maybe around the world. So it'll be more people-focused. It'll be focused on, in the category of what are we going to do about it? What are people doing to make life better? What are people doing to advocate for the marginalized? So I'm going to introduce our two guest speakers who I asked to appear as our kind of our maiden voyage, or our first episode for Season 2 of New Hate Radio, because they have just attended a major, I think major, I'm going to let them describe it, event related to just the subject that I'm talking about. More or less, okay, the election is over, the results are in, what now? Where do we go? What do we do? So, as I said, we have the Reverend Andy Oliver, who is the pastor of Allendale United Methodist Church, but is also very well known as an advocate for marginalized people and does a lot of other activities in the field of social justice. We also have Dylan Dames. Now, Dylan, before I go any further, is the artist who did the theme song. Our version of the theme song on No Hate Radio was performed by Dylan Dames, and we play parts of it in every single episode, and you'll hear part of it today. That song called No Stranger to the Rain has a lot to do with actually the items we're going to talk about today. A lot of people are looking at a pretty rainy existence right now. A lot of people have a lot of fears and trepidations. So I think it was worthy to note that not only do we use that theme song, not only does that song have the history that it has since the 1950s, but the version of it on No Hate Radio was done by this gentleman who is with us here today. So I want to really focus on the meeting, the group, the gathering, let you guys identify it, talk to us about it, tell us what you did, tell us what other people did, and tell us what your perceptions were of the benefits that might have come from the gathering. And you don't have to do the theme song, but we do appreciate you doing it.
I was ready to jump in.
All right. So tell us what it was. Tell us what it was about. Where did it come from? Who sponsored it? What do you think came out of it?
For sure. Yeah, I work for an organization called Faith in Florida. It is one of many federations that contribute to the work of Faith in Action, which is an organization that oversees work to address systemic racism and the economic barriers between people and the lives that they want or the lives that they deserve, right? So Faith in Action set up a conference based on an organizing model that came from their leadership. And the conference was called Architects of a New America. And it was a chance for us to think critically about how we can lay groundwork, like, of course, in a social and moral way, right? Because it's faith-based organizing, so that's a lot of narrative strategy, but also how to lay institutional groundwork to protect ourselves from attacks on liberty and freedom in the future. And how can we line up our organizations, federations, big and small, right? So the neighborhood association meeting around the corner, all the way up to senators and congresspeople. How can we line up our organizations to withstand the attacks that might be coming from this at current incoming administration, and also to come back stronger when we have another chance to affect national change. So in a lot of the work that I do, I don't often get to see the bread go on the table, right? Because we're working mostly in policy change and we don't get to do as much direct care and direct service. But from my perspective, Faith in Florida went up to join other federations to talk about, based on the conversations you're having with your clergy. Andy's one of those people, one of our strongest leaders in our base. He's been on the forefront of this much longer than I have. Based on conversations with clergy and leaders in your community, where do we want to go from here? So
what now?
Exactly. So the 3-day conference culminated in a vote. So of course, again, some of that narrative work that I talked about, right? Getting grounded, reflecting on values, making sure we're on the same page about that. But the final day of the Architects Conference was for us to take votes on which issues were most important to our base, not based on, what's your gut telling you? It's like, no, what are the conversations that are happening on the ground? What are people afraid of? What are they excited about? What are they prepared to do? Right? So we voted on issues, and Faith in Action already has a range of different campaigns in international work resisting global oppression, even outside of U.S. soil. They're working on climate justice and also on immigration. But after this most recent conference, all the federations voted to add 3 new issues to that platform. That's housing, public education, and mass incarceration. We're getting to a point now where we have to marry these conversations we have about social justice with simple bread and butter issues that affect everybody, and we need to move toward more class solidarity if we're going to be able to withstand some of the attacks coming politically. So issues like housing that affects so many people across race and gender and religion and condition of ableness, right? Issues like public education, where we're seeing attacks and liberties be slipped away. That's funneling through our schools, and most importantly, mass incarceration. I think we're about time, like we're due to have a conversation about the role of prisons and mass incarceration in the systems that we're trying to dismantle, and understanding that we can't talk about the work without talking about mass incarceration and what our opposition might benefit from locking up a bunch of people, for lack of a better term.
Let me stop you there just for a moment, because as you were going through the list, housing, of course, that seems incredibly important to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Public education and the defunding of public education seems I don't know how to stage something above a 10 in terms of important. But you said, curiously, you said most importantly, mass incarceration. Can you elaborate a little bit on why among those three you would see mass incarceration as the most important?
For sure. And, I'll definitely say I'm a little opinionated here. This is a little bit of a Dylan insert, and I'll definitely defer to Andy. I want to hear what his thoughts are. But I think that mass incarceration is the most important in that list of 6 because, number one, it's the most new to Faith in Action's work. Not that Faith in Action or Faith in Florida hasn't taken on carceral projects or maybe bad actors like elected law enforcement officials like state attorneys and stuff. We've dealt with criminal justice before, never with the lens of understanding the impact of mass incarceration and what these carceral projects like private prisons promise wealthy people and what they promise people that are not wealthy. So I think it's novel, and for that reason it's going to come with a lot of organizing and a lot of research and a lot of one-to-ones. Okay. But I also think the reason why I'm the most excited about that becoming a part of our national platform is because now we can begin to have public conversations about federal spending, so how our elected officials spend our money and where the money is going, because that actually opens the door for all the other issues we talk about, right? Housing, public education, and stuff like that.
Okay, that one other thing then that I want to interject. It seems like the issues that are being worked on are just macro issues. They're huge in context. They're huge in scope. They have a massive effect on people. And as the new federal administration comes in, not only at the top, but through the election of representatives and senators from around the country.
Right.
Was there anything addressed at the conference, or do you personally feel that there is a boots on the ground strategy that will make some progress in these areas, particularly for marginalized people?
For sure. I'll say something, then I'll let Andy hop in. So all of our federations, right, Faith in Texas, Faith in New York, and everybody that joined Faith in Nevada, we all contributed towards a general vote that would set up our 6 issues and build our platform for the next 4 years. But within our federation, so like within breakout groups, like when Faith in Florida would break out and we would talk to just Floridians, we also voted on how we went about those issues.
That's my question.
Exactly. Yeah. So we have, these two arms that we think about, where I wish we had language for it. I'm sure the language is probably out there somewhere. But one of those is bargaining for public power, right? So that's lobbying, running candidates for office, legislative change. And then the other arm is taking care of our community, what's right in front of us. So, stewardship, mutual aid, resistance work, community care. And, you can apply that to any of the 6 issues that we work on. So when it comes to like immigration, for example, that would be the work that we did with Senate Bill 1718, like going up to Tallahassee and being like, this thing is a disaster, how can we make it better? But while that was happening, congregations like Allendale and so many other churches in our base were doing the hard work of having conversations with community members, having conversations with stakeholders about who in our community is vulnerable and how can we help them, right? Because not everybody, you can't put everybody on a bus to Tallahassee and have them, So there's 2 arms to it, kind of. And then we had an opportunity to talk about where we see those 2 arms materializing in Florida specifically. So that did help a little bit. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Andy.
I think the brilliance of organizing, the importance of organizing, is that it's centered not in some type of vertical solution where a hero or a savior is going to step in, or the courts, or an individual. It's really centered in the horizontal solution of talking to our neighbors, and talking across the political spectrum, ideological perspective, spectrum, talking to people who are facing the same issues, no matter if they identify as red or blue. And as we've seen, especially here in Florida, a big reason why the outcomes have been the way they are is because Democratic Party is not listening to their neighbors. It's going to require some really, really great community organizing and reshifting of priorities if the Democratic Party is ever going to be anything that's viable into the future here in the state of Florida.
One of the main things that we do before and after the election results, it's mostly after, right, because we want to collect data, but we do a little bit of it before people vote too, is just asking them, not even based on who they're voting for, just asking them, do you feel represented in the candidates that you hear about?
Yeah.
Where are you hearing? Are you seeing it on TV? Are you getting mailers sent to your house? Regardless of all of that, like, do you feel like the people that are asking you for your support, do you feel like they represent you? And too often the answer is no, right? So we have to look at that with a critical lens. And, you know, if we consider like the Democratic Party a pathway to a solution and to like lifting up working people and addressing systemic harm, then we also need to urge them to do more listening and to collaborate more horizontally than they have in the past.
If there was an improved kind of horizontal collaboration through community organization,
right,
and through efforts to communicate to people, do you have a preconceived notion of what the input might be in this horizontal communication? Let's say I'm going to use some examples. Let's say we have a single parent family, maybe a single mother, 3 kids, no higher education, so forth. That person struggling for housing, struggling to make it, you know, that person's going to input to this community organizer or group. They're going to say, these are my problems. Maybe if it's a person who happens to be a trans or a gay person or couple, or someone who feels their fundamental rights are threatened, someone who has been unhoused for some lengthy period of time, you're going to get these inputs. Do you, in the organizations that you work with, have an idea before you even hear it of what those inputs might be and where the candidates have missed it? I guess is where I'm trying to go, is that if people feel unrepresented, how and why and what is it that they that has happened here? What's the disconnect?
You know, I think that's a very, very good question, and there's probably dozens of answers to that would fit super snugly. But I would say, from what I see in organizing in St. Petersburg and in Central Florida, is we try really hard for impacted people to be brought into the work. So something that we say at Faith in Florida a lot, where our motto is building beloved community, is that people who are most affected by the problem should be at the center of the solution.
Yeah.
So too often in organizing, our message or our narrative is coming from experts or people with a degree or people that elected officials. So what we try to do is get impacted people right in the middle of that and interrupt some of that messaging and get just like what people are actually saying and how they actually feel. And that's tough because what consistently comes up is that people's material conditions are too bad for them to perhaps think critically about long-term organizing and long-term strategy and solution. The best people in our base are people who have understood that by locking hands with Faith in Florida, the benefits might not be for them and they might be for their kids. And I think too many people are facing real challenges just in what's right in front of them, their material conditions, right? Like, you know, I think being concerned about the state of democracy and being concerned about climate and all of that stuff, I think that is a little bit of a privilege because the people we organize are concerned about rent
Yeah.
and about food and about daycare.
Well, you just keyed in on exactly. I think you were reading my mail there, Dylan, because what I was gonna say is that the political party process
Yeah.
over the years has become such a numbers game based and driven by the money that supports the parties and so forth, that the grassroots issues, I'll call them grassroots, sometimes these terms are overused, but the boots on the ground kind of issues of rent and car payments and jobs and, why do I not have daycare for my kids or whatever, all of these things. Just to use, kind of a crude old Texas saying, the deal is, when you're up to your ass in alligators, it's hard to remember that your initial objective was to drain the swamp. Yep. I think we've been talking about draining the swamp. Mm-hmm. Let me use that as an analogy.
For sure.
And the people want to hear about, how do you get the alligators off?
Yeah, that's perfect, Don. I think that's the perfect example. Something really similar that we talk about too is the analogy of the dam in organizing, right? And there's some kind of break in the dam, and the goal of organizing and strategic and systemic change is to repair the dam. And I think we're so busy pulling people out of the water in the town that's getting flooded, right?
Yeah.
From the dam. We're pulling people out of the river, trying to get them dry. And we need to be patching the hole, right? So to your question about what would people say if more impacted people were brought into the center of the work and into the center of the message, is that they would say cost of living without a doubt. I know, and my experience is limited, but that is what I've heard consistently. Either they will say affordable housing, they will say the safety of their streets and like how much funding and care is put into youth programs, right, to keep their kids out of trouble. It will always harken back to cost of living.
So budgetary priorities at the federal and state levels have had a big shift.
Yeah.
Let's just look local here in our great blue dot that we live in, St. Petersburg, where with a majority of Democrats on city council, a Democrat as mayor, the only only people you'll find at Center of Solutions here are developers and baseball team owners.
Yep.
We ran a really great candidate for city council, and the party bosses were so afraid of someone that would come in that would be for the working class people, that they went and preemptively endorsed a candidate who doesn't even live in our city, who pretended to live with his mom here in St. Pete, hasn't been seen before the election or after the election, has never voted in the city of St. Petersburg. Our former mayor, Rick Kreisman, a champion Democrat in this city, endorsed Juan Lopez out of the gate. Yeah. The Democratic Party is shooting itself in the foot again, not just once, but again and again and again. And they are losing more and more people every time they do it.
And that's a worthwhile point that I wanted to kind of key on a little bit, is that I don't believe marginalized people. Sometimes I make these assertions, and please correct me if you think I'm wrong with these assertions. But this one that I'm going to make, consider it for whatever value you think it has. We have only two parties that have a reasonable chance of electing a candidate to anything in America. Only two. I mean, we can say there's a Green Party and there's a Libertarian and there's other parties. There are two parties that have a chance to elect somebody. Occasionally there's an independent. The U.S. Senate actually has two, but rare.
Right.
So if I am one of the impacted people, and I'm going to use your terminology, however I'm impacted, whether it's socioeconomically or racially or gender identity, or I don't care, pick one.
Yeah.
I'm not going to look to the GOP. I'm not going. I'm not.
No, increasingly, what you are finding in the data is that people aren't also interested in aligning themselves with Democrats who are only interested in keeping the status quo for people at the top.
Sure.
Yep.
I mean,
The wealthy. Yeah, they give lip service to Black Lives Matter and LGBTQ people and all that stuff. But when the rubber hits the road, at least locally, this Democratic Party is only concerned about the wealthy.
so where we are is, to finish that point exactly that Andy chimed in on just then, if we're not going to look to the GOP, and I'm going to assert right here on No Hate Radio that we're not going to look to the GOP. Their priorities and messaging and everything that is spoken from the candidates and all that tell us that marginalized people are not considered there.
Right.
Not only are they not at the center of that solution, but they're not at the table.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Democrat Party, whether it be statewide, I had a lot of experience over the years in Texas and other places with the party system. And he makes a very good point. What happens to the Democrat Party is that although much, as we'll use the term lip service, but although much is said in favor of equality, inclusion, diversity, opportunity, and so forth,
Yeah.
the people who actually drive the train in the Democratic Party don't have markedly different interests. This is a scary thing for me to say, but they don't have markedly different interests than the ones who are driving the train in the GOP.
Nail on the head, Don.
The only difference I see is the quantity. Those who drive the train in the GOP are billionaires. The ones who drive the train in the Democratic Party are multimillionaires. But the point is, the train drivers, allow me the use of that term, not the ones who run for office, not the ones who, whose names are out there, but the ones who really drive the train. I'm going to key on what Andy says. I don't see their priorities being very much different. So as a community organizer, as a member of national and state groups, back to my question, and I realize it's a question without an answer probably, but then how within the system do organizers like yourself or advocates like Andy or others who really want to see equality, diversity, inclusion, social justice, fairness, those things, how does that message get brought to the train drivers? I'm not so concerned about the office holders because who are they going to listen to? They're going to listen to the train drivers, aren't they?
Yep.
So how do you get a message to the train driver that, as we used to say back in Texas, you're feeding too high to trough. Come on, back down just a little bit. Let some other people have something. In other words, we might say we want equality. It would be a huge gain if we just said, let's make it a little better. If we just said, let's make the inequities not so huge, not so big. You might talk to people about that. My question is, how do you talk to the train drivers, Dylan?
I know as Dylan, I have no access to said train drivers, but I think from an organizing perspective is, people that are, at high places within the Democratic Party, people that manage the processes and spending of the DNC and all of these groups, right? I think the message is being made clear to them on the data based on people's faith and trust in the Democratic Party. And I think we're at a time now where everybody is fair game. There is not a single group that we can say we don't have to organize them because we're sure they'll vote blue. That's out of the window now.
Not anymore.
The congressional district in New York that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez won in a sweep, flipped red this year. And that was less than 4 years ago when she didn't even lift a finger in that district and they all voted for her. So no group that we trust will vote Democrat can we be lazy about anymore. And, I've been trying really hard to organize millennials and Gen Z. So I've been following the data on that for the past few years now. And I don't consider myself an expert on elections, but when I started working for Faith in Florida, it was for a mayoral election. And what I've seen in the data is that consistently, the two-party system has been losing young voters to the left. So people, more Gen Z and millennials registering as independent or the Democratic Party growing. This is the first year, this past election in November 2024, where the Democratic Party lost young voters in both directions. They lost people to the left and they lost people that went and voted for Trump, right? Gen Z men overwhelmingly surprised all the pollers and voted red this year. So right now, I think the message is being made very clear to them. It's like, you don't just have to worry about losing people to the Green Party and the Party for Social Liberation and Democratic Socialists. Now you have to worry about losing people to the GOP. And I think we're in a time now where either they listen to us or the numbers keep going down. And that's just where we're at.
So if I can summarize what you're saying, if it's not fair, tell me it's not fair. The way you get the train drivers to listen is they lose. If they lose an election, now they have to listen.
Unfortunately. I mean, some of them will just flip seat once they lose. But yeah.
Clergy has wasted a lot of opportunities over the last years to be an influence for diversity, equity, inclusion, for a lot of things. What would be your position on that, Andy?
I mean, I'll go back to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. He said that, I'm going to paraphrase, too many churches and clergy are confused about their job and think that they're a thermometer and supposed to act on public opinion, keeping their people happy, when in fact they are called to be thermostats and to set the temperature. And he was very clear if we get that right, if there's clarity in what your job is as the church, as clergy, then things will change.
One of your colleagues and good friend of mine, and a man that you know, told me one time, he used the phraseology about his job as a pastor in the United Methodist Church he felt was to comfort the afflicted but afflict the comfortable. And I think that's not a message that our clergy pays a lot of attention to, except for social activists like Andy or others like him. I'm not just singling him out. But for most part, I find that historically, religious organizations have wasted the opportunity to be an instrument for the marginalized and so forth. And that was the point I was trying to make, I think.
Well, I think one of my most important jobs as a pastor is to name evil. That's what Jesus did. Jesus named evil, even to its face. And then to put myself at the feet of organizers like Dylan and groups that are organizing, the people that are doing the work at the center of it that are impacted. So our trans organizers and our immigrant organizers, our undocumented organizers, and to follow their lead, black and brown organizers. That's the model I've followed. That's the model that Allendale has followed, to follow their lead and try to decenter even our whiteness as a predominantly and historically white congregation.
Yeah, thank you. I always like to do this when I have the benefit of persons who come in and spend the time with us to discuss these things. Mm-hmm. Is there something else you might like to add to this particular dialogue, this particular discussion that I have failed to ask or failed to address?
No, I mean, I think you're doing a good job. I think going into the next set of challenges for progressive people of faith or organized progressive folks is a return to the fundamentals of organizing. I think we're in a time now where these past election results, not just in terms of candidates, but in terms of what the electorate said they wanted, what kind of policies they said they wanted, what they believed was best for Florida. I think now we have to face like all of the shortcuts and failures in our organizing that exposed, right? So every time we take a shortcut in our organizing and we do what's the cheapest way to mobilize people or the quickest way to make a stink or the biggest reaction we can make instead of actually engaging and talking to people, that's how we go about making miscalculations and missteps. And the return to the fundamentals that Faith in Florida is being called into and that other organizations that I'm aware of is being called into is talk to your neighbors. Talk to your neighbors. Get a deep understanding of what's going on in your community. And then when we come into spaces together to organize, we need to understand how to publicize a broad layman's understanding of how power is moving in the state, how money is moving in the state, so that we're not surprised by how people vote. And granted, I do think a good majority of Floridians may have been manipulated, right? Like we know in Amendment 4, we know about all this stuff that's been going on, having people voting against their interests. But I think we would overestimate ourselves to pretend like everyone was just duped because people spoke and they thought that those things were best. So now we have to go back to the one-to-ones and the research and the education and community awareness so people know, hey, that is really not what's best for you. And helping people to understand that when one part of the body is sick, the whole body is sick. We're seeing people fabricate these caste systems in their own communities. Again, the things that we fought so hard to escape. We have brown people deciding which of their brown neighbors deserves to be amongst Americans, to be here going after the same economic and social goals that somebody that's documented may be going after. We have even in the LGBTQ community infighting about people trying to push trans folks out of the movement, right? These trans exclusionary radical feminists or TERFs. So we're having a lot of gaps in understanding that someone that runs on a campaign about disappearing people is never your ally. It doesn't matter how many years you have on your green card, or it doesn't even matter if you've been naturalized. You just never know when you could be next. So I think we just have to go back to the fundamentals of talking to each other, building relationships, disclosure, storytelling, understanding each other's gifts and talents so that we're prepared when the window comes. And that would be something that was organized, not something that was mobilized or that when we're able to jump through the window with those relationships strong and with that sort of layman's understanding of what's best for the community, I think that is when we'll be organized.
Thank you, Dylan. My final thing I want to say. I had an opportunity January, I don't remember what day, 3rd or 4th of January, to spend 2.5 hours in a one-on-one conversation with a gentleman that I've known for 30 plus years who is a very, very strong GOP and MAGA supporter. And I resolved that I wanted to enter that conversation on the sort of theme that we try to do here, No Hate Radio. I'm not going to say anything bad about I want to inquire. I want to learn. I want to get to know. One of the things I learned was that there are literal quotes from Fox News that are recited by folks in the MAGA movement it's an indoctrination level that I've not ever seen before, and I've studied political science for a long time. But the other thing that I think was really intriguing about it, and you addressed it in your, we have to talk to our neighbors, and that we can no longer assume that somebody is and will vote blue or will be this or will be that. This particular individual, who was an engineer, actually, spent a whole career with Texas Instruments, et cetera.
Oh, nice.
Not a, not a stupid or ignorant person at all. Very strong MAGA supporter, though. But the interesting thing was his comment, the thing he said that let me know that superficial arguments are being sold without any real effort to vet it or understand it or know whether it's the truth, was a comment about, and usually I don't like to even mention individual names, but I have to make this point, was the appointment of RFK Jr. to be the health czar.
Secretary, yeah.
And I asked him what he thought, about that. And it became clear to me that the only thing he knew about RFK Jr. was that he was a member of the Kennedy clan. And that he did not know, and you would think.
Yeah.
So I think we make false assumptions about people's levels of just street knowledge.
Oh, yeah.
I guess is what I'm saying.
For sure. We had trending searches on Google of can I change my vote? We had reports from our organizers in Miami and poll workers in Miami of people showing up at early voting precincts saying, can I change my vote? All kinds of things. Yeah, I think a lot of people are surprised by what's actually behind some of the candidates and policies that they may be supporting after debates, after the RNC, just after many appearances, and as more information comes out, even locally, right? An op-ed comes out, and then we have people that come to us and they're like, hey, originally I was on the other side of this, but can I learn some more about, I saw this thing in the news. So a lot of people just really don't know. They just don't know.
I don't know. All right.
Yeah.
That's kind of my final comment. I think if we have no other comments in that regard, let me wrap some things up here for us. Remember, we are back. This is season 2. This is No Hate Radio. You can call us and leave a message, 442-4-NO-HATE. You can also access any of our episodes, season 1 or season 2, by going to our website, nohateradio.com. There's also an email input right there on the website where you can send us a email correspondence. And you can ask us that you would like to address this or that subject, whatever you would be important. Remember, where we're trying to go is humanitarian activity and activities that are undergoing right now, individual or group activities, to try and make people's lives better. What are they addressing? It's the why question. Why are things the way they are? And the second question is, what are we going to do about it? We would be interested in anyone who would like to contribute or who would like to give us information about someone they think could offer us some insight into those subjects. And with that, the first installment, first episode of season 2, No Hate Radio, is in the can. This is No Hate Radio.